Lily is in Watford. Lily, are you here to solve everything?
I'm not here to solve very much, I'm afraid. I'm just as baffled as you.
It's just bizarre, right? I mean, this is real time, as the kids say. This is all unfolding in real time, but it makes no sense at all.
I feel like I'm living in a sort of, a parallel universe somehow.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and it's all gobbledygook. Every bit of guidance on every level doesn't, like you say in your show, it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
It depends where you are, and it depends who you're talking to, and it depends whether or not the decision or the plan to shut the schools has been in the papers, or whether it hasn't been in the papers, and if it's been in the papers, yada.
I mean, there are schools, I know for myself, my own personal experience, where people have had to shut because they cannot staff the schools.
Yes.
And they have situations where senior leaders within the school, members of staff and children have had to isolate because there are too many cases within the school.
Well, the first thing I read this morning was an email from the head teacher at a private school where one of my listeners sends their child, and it stated the main reason for this is that we've run out of staff.
Yeah, but the private schools have more autonomy. They can make those decisions. If you're working either in a multi-academy trust, I mean, I'm a teacher, my children are isolating, we all have to be off school because, one of the members of our family has symptoms. And we know of colleagues who have had to shut their school for this very reason. But the people working within local authorities and multi-academy trusts, they have less autonomy. Certainly the local authority schools do. And I just feel that with Greenwich, what the government are doing is they're being punitive.
Well,
they're being utterly punitive for no real reason. This is happening all over the place, and it's being done for the safety of the pupils. And yet, Greenwich have shown leadership and said, OK, this is not a good situation, we're making a decision. Because they've shown leadership, which the government are unable and unwilling to do, they're being hit by a possible lawsuit.
And I would say they couldn't possibly, this is a Secretary of State, they couldn't possibly be this petty and vindictive. And then you would say, we're talking about Gavin Williamson, James.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a terrible situation, and it permeates right the way through everything that they're doing, not just with the coronavirus and schools. It's, everything. It's
Brexit most obviously, I suppose, isn't it?
It's the whole business about Christmas.
But usually we can make sense. I mean, if this programme does anything, even as we express our mutual befuddlement and discombobulation, we can usually understand what's going on without reaching quite as low as you reach with it's just base vindictive cynicism. And I've got nothing else to offer, Lily.
Well, it's crisis management. It's lack of leadership, crisis management, not really knowing what they're doing, trying to lurch from one crisis to the next without having too many problems, but they are, by doing that, creating more problems. I know for a fact that no head teacher shuts their school lightly. No head teacher takes the decision to take children out, and they're being put in a position where they have to because they're following the government's guidance, and yet they're being whipped for it.
Yes.
And, Greenwich local authority are being effectively whipped for the fact that they have handed that decision-making, taken it away from head teachers and said, we'll take it off your heads and we'll make the decision because it's the only safe and sensible thing to do. I mean, if there was any real leadership, perhaps they should have shut the schools on the 11th. I'm not a big fan of that. My son's in year 11, he's doing GCSEs. I don't want my children to miss school. I don't want any of the children that I teach to miss school. I feel desperately guilty that my class are now without a teacher this week, and they have,
And your ultimate boss is the Secretary of State for Education, who gives the impression of being a man who would struggle to spell his own name.
Well, quite.
I'm reading page 2 of the Times, because I hate this little feeling I've got in the back of my mind, even though the evidence now is becoming irresistible, that I've missed something huge and there's a really easy explanation for it. But I'm just reading the Times coverage. The government has overruled local councils and issued an order compelling them to keep schools open.
Yeah.
There's no mention in this article of all the schools that we've now discovered in the course of this morning's programme are actually currently shut.
Yes, and they're not shutting because they want to. They're shutting because of the safety factor for all the pupils. I mean, imagine how up in arms we would be if a whole cohort of kids within a whole school caught it, passed it on, and people died. Who would they blame? Who would they point the finger at? The schools, the local authority, and maybe the government somewhere along the line. But actually, this is coming from the government. The government are showing no leadership at all.
No, I hear you. I do. And I think you'll understand why I say this, but I would welcome a more positive analysis or a more positive explanation than the ones that we're coming up with. But what happens when a vacuum is created? Anything can move into it. On this occasion, quite probably correct